Right now, the multi-trillion-dollar digital infrastructure that runs your smartphone, your bank, and like the world's most advanced AI platforms,
Mm.
it's actually being maintained largely by people working completely for free.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's a massive economic paradox. It completely defies, everything we're taught about traditional economics.
Totally. When we think about web browsers like Chrome or complex machine learning frameworks like TensorFlow, there's this natural assumption that they were built in some sleek, hyper-funded corporate lab somewhere.
Right, but the foundation of the entire digital world actually runs on open source software.
Hmm.
We're looking at a global tech economy generating unprecedented wealth, all resting on this bedrock of uncompensated labor.
Welcome to this deep dive into the source material. Today, we have an incredible stack of sources to go through, looking at recent academic studies from 2023 and 2025.
Yeah, and these studies analyze the behavior of over 100,000 developers on GitHub, and then they cross-reference that with the funding outcomes of more than 160,000 U.S. startups.
It's just a massive data set. And we're also digging into platform documentation from organizations like Tidelift and Open Collective.
Right. It really gives us a comprehensive look from multiple angles. You get the micro level view of the individual coder, and then the macro level view of how venture capital flows.
So our mission today is to unpack the secret economics of open source. We're going to figure out why highly talented people volunteer their time for free and how early stage startups turn that free code into, millions of dollars.
And maybe most interestingly, we'll get into the absolute psychological disaster that happens when you actually try to pay these developers for their work.
Oh man, yeah, that part is wild. So for you listening, whether you're an entrepreneur trying to secure funding or a tech worker or just someone who relies on digital tools every day, understanding this invisible economy is crucial.
Absolutely. It really helps you see how the modern world actually gets built behind the scenes. And to build that understanding, we really have to start with a concept economists call the public goods problem.
All right, let's get into that. What exactly is a public good?
So, a public good is something that is non excludable and non rivalrous. The classic textbook example is a lighthouse. You can't easily stop a ship from seeing the light.
Right, that's the non-excludable part.
Exactly. And one ship using the light doesn't diminish the light for the next ship. That's the non-rivalrous part. So if the lighthouse is shining, everyone gets to navigate safely.
Regardless of whether they actually chipped in to pay the electricity bill or not.
Precisely. And that creates the infamous free rider problem. If rational, self-interested people can use something for free, they'll usually just wait for someone else to build it.
And pay for it.
Yeah.
So the typical result is that nobody builds it at all.
Yeah, but the open source software commons, which is effectively this massive digital lighthouse, it thrives. And the literature we're reviewing explains this through the lens of career signaling and information asymmetry.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because in a standard job market, it's incredibly hard for an employer to look at a resume and know if a programmer actually possesses like top-tier talent.
Resumes are noisy. I mean, anyone can write proficient in Python or expert in machine learning.
Right. So developers use open source contributions to create a highly visible, undeniable public portfolio.
I was thinking about it it's like a chef choosing to cook for free in a giant glass kitchen in the middle of a city square,
I love that analogy.
just so restaurant owners walking by can actually see their knife skills rather than just taking their word for it. But, I mean, is this economic motive actually driving the behavior? Or do people in tech just believe in free information?
Well, there is a strong philosophical culture in tech for sure, but the data reveals a very clear economic engine underneath it. The researchers tracked the exact same people over time, comparing their coding output before, during, and after a job hunt.
Oh, wow. So they could see the shifts in real time. Yeah, exactly. And the math shows that programmers dynamically increase their open source activity by an estimated 6.8% the moment they start transitioning jobs.
To use the kitchen analogy, these chefs start chopping vegetables almost 7% faster and much more visibly the second they notice a restaurant manager looking through the window.
That is exactly what the data implies. There's a sorting mechanism happening here. Highly talented developers don't have to sweat to write flawless, bug-free code.
Right, it's easy for them.
Yeah, it takes them very little effort to show off, so they gladly step into that glass kitchen. Mediocre programmers, however, find it incredibly difficult and time-consuming to produce code that withstands public scrutiny.
So they tend to hide, right? They hide in proprietary, closed-source companies where their daily output is locked behind corporate doors.
Exactly. The transparency of open source acts as a filter. If you put bad code in a public repository, other developers will definitely point it out.
So it's a great deal for the developers who land high-paying jobs because of their public portfolios. But that means there's just an endless buffet of free, gourmet code sitting out in the public square.
A massive buffet.
If developers are cooking it to get hired, who's coming along and eating it? Startups, right?
Startups are the primary consumers, yes. And the 2025 study analyzing those 160,000 U.S. startups on Crunchbase really shows the sheer scale of the feast.
They're consuming it, and they're turning it into serious venture capital. When the researchers cross-referenced those startup companies with their activity on GitHub, the advantage was staggering.
Oh, totally. Early-stage startups that engage with external open-source communities are 36% more likely to get their first round of funding.
36%, that is a huge edge.
And the benefits compound beyond just the likelihood of funding. The data shows these companies raise significantly larger amounts of money, and they attract capital from elite VCs.
Wait, let me stop you there, because if I'm an investor, I want a moat. I want proprietary technology that nobody else has.
You're right, the traditional mindset.
Yeah. If a startup relies heavily on free public code that any competitor in the world can just download tomorrow, why doesn't an investor view that as a massive liability?
What's fascinating here is the cost-benefit trade-off of appropriability, which is really just an economic term for how easily a company can protect its idea from being copied.
Okay, so how does that play out in the data?
The data reveals that engaging with open source works spectacularly well, but only for startups building highly complex, novel technologies, like AI or blockchain infrastructure.
So spaces where the technology is so new and so difficult that literally nobody has all the answers yet.
Exactly. In those complex fields, innovation is basically like snapping together different puzzle pieces from various sources. A startup simply cannot build every single piece of an AI framework from scratch internally.
They'd just run out of money before they finish.
They absolutely would. The need for speed, like the absolute necessity to build a minimum viable product, quickly, completely outweighs the risk of a competitor copying them.
So using an open source library like TensorFlow helps an AI startup get to market in 6 months instead of like 3 years.
Right. In those industries, speed is your protective moat, not secrecy. But if you aren't building a massive AI platform, the strategy totally changes.
Yeah, I saw that. The study found the exact opposite effect for startups in highly competitive consumer-facing markets.
Exactly.
If you're building a simple consumer app where it's already hard to stand out, relying too much on open source actually hurts your chances of getting funded.
Because the risk of someone cloning your basic app is just too high, and the benefits of saving a little time on coding don't offset that risk. Investors know when a market demands speed versus when it demands proprietary secrets.
I actually dug into that 2025 study because I was honestly very skeptical of the findings at first.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, I thought maybe these startups are just making their GitHub profiles look pretty to trick venture capitalists, like doing cosmetic updates to their README files, essentially putting up window dressing.
Yeah, just to appear like they were deeply embedded in the tech community.
Exactly. But the researchers actually used machine learning to catch that, didn't they?
They did. They anticipated that exact behavior. They deployed natural language processing to classify the specific type of code these startups were interacting with.
Ah, so they separated the real work from the fluff.
Yes. They separated substantive work, like integrating machine learning libraries or building APIs, from purely cosmetic updates to documentation.
And the investors didn't fall for the window dressing. The 36% funding boost only correlated with substantive, heavy technical engagement.
Right. These startups aren't faking it. They're genuinely utilizing the global community of developers to solve incredibly hard problems.
So let's step back and look at what this all means. We have a system where individual developers write brilliant, free code to signal their talent.
Yep.
Startups take that free code, use it to build complex products faster, and secure millions of dollars in elite venture capital.
Which is great for the startups.
Right. But if I'm the developer pulling all-nighters to maintain that code, I'm starting to feel a bit exploited. It feels incredibly unbalanced. Why didn't platforms just start paying the developers directly to fix this?
Well, GitHub actually attempted exactly that. In May 2019, they launched a program called GitHub Sponsors. It was structurally similar to Patreon, but specifically designed for open source developers.
Oh, interesting. So people could just tip them.
Yeah, individuals and large corporations could financially sponsor developers directly on the platform. And to kickstart this, GitHub introduced a massive matching fund. For a developer's first year, GitHub pledged to match sponsorships dollar for dollar up to $5,000.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because that 2023 National Bureau of Economic Research paper tracked the output of roughly 100,000 developers as this program rolled out.
And the results are just a wild two-part lesson in this strange psychology of human motivation.
Totally. So the first part of the psychological twist happened when developers simply opted into the program, right?
Yes. The moment a developer clicked the button to become sponsorable, putting a badge on their profile, saying they were open to receiving money, their coding output spiked massively.
Even before a single dollar arrived,
Yeah.
talking a 50% spike in output. They started creating new repositories, writing more code, actively opening issues.
They were hustling hard. They wanted to be highly visible to any potential corporate sponsor browsing the site. It really amplifies that glass kitchen effect we talked about.
The potential for immediate cash just supercharged their desire to be seen working. But the second finding is where this entire well-intentioned incentive structure just collapsed.
Yeah, it completely backfired. Because when the developers actually received a sponsorship, when that money finally hit their bank account, their innovative output absolutely plummeted.
The data is so stark on this. The creation of new repositories, which the researchers use as the primary proxy for fresh innovation, dropped by 16%.
And not only did innovation drop, but these developers also significantly reduced their community-oriented tasks. They stopped documenting bugs, and they spent less time helping other projects.
To be clear, though, they didn't just log off and walk away from their computers entirely, right?
No. The study measured their raw, daily coding effort through something called commits, which are basically just routine updates to existing code.
And that baseline effort stayed exactly the same. But the creative spark, the invention of new things for the public commons, just completely tanked.
This phenomenon is known in behavioral economics as crowding out intrinsic motivation. When you take an activity driven by community service or personal reputation and you insert a direct financial transaction.
And you fundamentally alter the psychological contract.
Exactly.
I was thinking about it like this. Imagine a friend asks you to help them move on a Saturday. You show up, carry heavy boxes up 3 flights of stairs all day, and you feel great about it. You're doing a generous favor for someone you care about.
Right, you feel like a good person.
But at the end of the day, that friend hands you a crumpled $5 bill as payment, suddenly you're furious. You aren't evaluating it as a favor anymore. You're evaluating it as an insulting wage.
That is exactly what happened to the people building the internet. It completely ruins the dynamic. A developer goes from viewing themselves as a respected, autonomous leader contributing to a global commons
to viewing themselves as an underpaid contractor performing a task for $5 a month.
Exactly. The intrinsic joy is crowded out by the market valuation. And the researchers even checked to see if the problem was just that the tips were too small.
Oh, right. Like, if you paid them more, maybe the innovation would come roaring back.
That was the hypothesis. So they looked at the data around January 2020, which is when GitHub's initial $5,000 matching program officially ended.
So for thousands of developers, their effective income from the platform was sliced in half overnight.
Right. And if inadequate compensation was the root cause of the drop in innovation, you would expect behavior to change dramatically again when the matching funds vanished.
But the trend lines were totally flat.
Completely flat. Output didn't bounce back, nor did it crash further. That proved the issue wasn't the specific dollar amount. The damage was done the moment the relationship transitioned to a market exchange.
This leaves us, and really everyone listening, with a massive dilemma. Because if the digital world requires this free code to function, and startups need it to innovate, but trying to pay developers directly kills their creativity, how do we prevent this whole ecosystem from collapsing?
Because developers inevitably face burnout if they're maintaining global infrastructure on their weekends for a decade.
Right. So what's the fix?
Well, that burnout is the existential threat hanging over the digital commons. But the solution the industry is gravitating toward doesn't rely on individual tipping. Instead, we're seeing the rise of institutional and structural frameworks.
Okay, like platforms like Tidelift and Open Collective.
Yes, they represent a fundamental pivot in how open source is sustained.
Let's look closely at how Tidelift actually functions, because it completely rewired the mechanism. Instead of a developer putting out a digital tip jar, hoping for a donation, Tidelift creates a formal B2B transaction.
Right, a business-to-business relationship.
Exactly. Say a Fortune 500 company uses 20 different open source tools in their software stack. They buy a subscription to Tidelift. Tidelift then pays the maintainers of those specific tools.
But, and this is crucial, the developers aren't getting paid to innovate. They're getting paid specifically to provide maintenance, guarantee security patches, and ensure the code meets corporate compliance standards.
Ah, so it's effectively a service level agreement.
Exactly. It acknowledges that building a new, exciting tool is an act of creative innovation, but maintaining that tool for 5 years is tedious labor.
So by compensating the maintenance as a defined service, it provides developers with predictable, passive income without crowding out the joy of their initial invention.
That's the goal. And then we have the logistical nightmare that Open Collective solves. Back in 2015, they recognized a glaring structural flaw in the whole system.
Right. Say a decentralized group of 50 developers across 15 countries builds a vital piece of software, and a massive corporation wants to give them a $100,000 grant.
How do they actually accept the money? A loose collective of internet strangers doesn't have a legal corporate entity.
They don't have a shared bank account. Who signs the tax forms? Who is legally liable?
And that is exactly where Open Collective steps in to provide fiscal sponsorship. They act as the legal and financial umbrella for these decentralized groups.
So they provide the corporate shell so the community doesn't have to hire lawyers and accountants. Open Collective takes the corporate grant, holds the money in a transparent public ledger, and allows developers to submit expenses against it.
It grants institutional legitimacy to grassroots movements. A major enterprise can confidently fund a project knowing there's a secure, legally compliant infrastructure managing the transaction.
Rather than wiring thousands of dollars to some random developer's personal PayPal account.
Exactly, which no corporate accounting department would ever approve anyway.
But wait, if Open Collective suddenly controls the financial plumbing for thousands of the world's most important open source projects, aren't we just creating a new vulnerability? Like, how do we prevent these funding platforms from becoming massive corporate overlords themselves?
That's a great point. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the evolution of Open Collective is actually a masterclass in preventing corporate capture. In 2024, they executed a process they called an exit to community.
Oh, I read about this. They explicitly transitioned the stewardship of their entire platform away from a traditional profit-driven startup model.
Yes, they handed control over to a U.S. 501c nonprofit called OFCO, the Open Finance Consortium.
Which is an infrastructure owned and governed collectively by the very communities that rely on it.
Right. Their documentation highlights a core philosophy. Money should move in the open, in service of the community. By institutionalizing the digital commons as a nonprofit, they structurally insulate the ecosystem from being bought out or manipulated by any single massive tech corporation.
Wow. It's just an incredible journey we've tracked today. We started with individual programmers showcasing their skills in a metaphorical glass kitchen, hoping to catch the eye of an employer.
Yeah, and then we explored how startups devour that free labor to rapidly build products and secure millions in venture capital, particularly in complex fields like AI.
Right. And then we dug into the counterintuitive psychology of money, learning how direct tipping actually crowds out human creativity.
And finally, we unpack the structural innovations like B2B maintenance contracts and nonprofit fiscal sponsors that are quietly working in the background to ensure the internet doesn't collapse under its own weight.
It's a lot to take in, but it's so fundamental to how our world works now.
It really is. But this raises an important question, though, as we look to the future.
Okay, what's that?
Well, we've firmly established that human developers currently write this massive volume of open source code as a highly visible signal to advance their careers, right?
Yeah.
But what happens to this fragile ecosystem over the next 5 years as AI agents become capable of writing, debugging, and maintaining code automatically?
Oh, wow.
I mean, an AI agent doesn't have a career concern. It doesn't need to build a resume to impress a hiring manager. And it certainly doesn't require a wage or intrinsic motivation.
That is a fascinating and honestly slightly terrifying thought. If human developers realize they can no longer compete with AI to show off their skills, the entire economic incentive to work in that glass kitchen just vanishes.
Exactly. Will the great digital commons of free human code just dry up entirely? Or will this massive invisible infrastructure evolve into something we can't even recognize yet?
The foundational incentives of the tech industry are about to face a stress test unlike anything they have ever seen.
Without a doubt.
Well, that is definitely something for you to chew on the next time you open a web browser. Use a free app, or marvel at the latest AI tool. The invisible infrastructure holding it all together is constantly shifting beneath our feet.
It really is.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Next time you see someone working for free to show off their skills, just remember, there is an entire multi-billion-dollar economy quietly waiting to profit from their effort. We'll catch you next time.